Your wake-up call. Well, this week we've been looking into the scriptures to see what the scriptures say about sharing our faith. There's been some questions asked to me. Can I do devotions on sharing our faith? And so I have attempted to give you some principles this week. As I've said every day, there's no way that I can give you the one end-all sentence that's going to cover every time somebody asks you about your faith. It's just not possible. But what we can do is look into the scriptures and we can find principles that will guide us in our daily life. And we understand that everything we do, there are principles behind them that help us perform those functions or those things successfully when we follow those principles. Everything from baking to woodworking to crafts or whatever. There's whatever aspect you want to look at or whatever thing you want to look at, there's principles that you must follow to do them correctly. And so sharing our faith is no different. There's principles that we must follow. If you remember Monday, we looked in the scriptures and Peter said that, hey, you've always got to be ready to give an account for the hope that's in you. And we must be reminded. We've got to be reminded on a daily basis. Not that we should stand ready to give some sort of college lecture or that we should stand in some way to be an apologist, but rather just able to articulate the reason for the hope that is in us. And that's not I don't think that's an unreasonable statement from the scriptures that we should be ready. And then we found that on Tuesday we found that, if we're going to do this, the Lord should be first. And so when we talk about our faith, we should lead with the Lord, not with how bad we are, not with how bad our situation was, but how good God is. And so we found this principle of that He is always first. Wednesday we've seen where oftentimes we fall into the fear factor, if you will, and we're afraid to talk to people. It makes us nervous, and God give you strength and help you. And yesterday we seen where sharing our faith it helps strengthen the other Christians around us when we begin to talk about the good things that God's done for us. And what beautiful thing about the community of believers and the assembly of the church or the local body is that every now and again we'll have a time of testimonies where somebody will begin to talk about all the wonderful things that God has done in their life. And you can't get that sitting at home. And so you come together and we get to encourage one another through the Word and through our experiences and through what God's done in our life. And so what a wonderful thing to be able to share our faith and strengthen one another. And then today, so finally we're going to finish this up. And as I said, I do not have a sentence to give you. I just have some principles. And then, so here we are in John chapter 14 this morning, and Christ is speaking to His disciples and He's telling them, He's trying to comfort them, and he's telling them that He's the true vine. But as he's talking to them, he says to them in verse 26, He says, "But the Comforter, which is the Holy Ghost, whom the Father will send in my name, He shall teach you all things and bring all things to your remembrance, whatsoever I've said unto you." He said, basically, I'm not going to be here, but there's a friend you can phone. And I gave you that title this morning, trying to make it an attention grabber. But there's oftentimes we get in a conversation and we just don't know how to give the answer. We're not prepared. And I tell you, life, when life happens, there's no cheat sheet. When life happens, there's no, let's take a pause and let me go figure this out. And so what Christ was explaining to them is He said the Holy Ghost, the Comforter will bring all things to remembrance. Now, in order for Him to bring things to our remembrance, we will first have to have heard them or read them. And this is very important today, because if we're going to declare the goodness of God and we're going to declare our faith to a lost and dying and a hurting world, then we're going to have to be familiar with Him. And He said, I'll bring these things to remembrance. There's something called muscle memory. And when we are in the heat of things, the thick of things, whether it's a traumatic situation, whether it's a very intense situation, we rely on something that we call muscle memory. And that is where we don't have time to think about what we're doing. We just do it, and we do it correctly. And that is because we've practiced it one way, or we're so very familiar with it that, that whenever that intense situation or that fearful or maybe that stressful situation happens, we perform the function, we perform it just as we should. And, our faith is no different. If we're familiar with His Word, if we're familiar with why we believe what we believe, then that'll be very easy to share once we stand in front of somebody else. Well, I hope this week, as we've looked at some of these scriptures, it was a help to you. I know everybody wants the one sentence that just gets it done, but listen, it's upon these principles. If you'll build your relationship with the Lord upon principles and not just on a sentence, then no matter where you're at, no matter who you're talking to, you will be able to confidently and adequately share your faith with them. And that's what matters, is that we can be an accurate representation or an ambassador for Jesus Christ. So let's do that today. Let's do it with joy in our hearts and a smile on our face. I know it's going to be a cold Friday, but let's go out and be that light and be that witness today. All right? Well, I pray that you have a wonderful Friday. I pray that God blesses you abundantly.